we are live in a living color from Scimitar Studios in Denville, New Jersey. You're listening live to the Open Mic program right here on Blog Talk Radio. Welcome aboard, folks, into the Sports Talk Nation. And we got a great show for you today as we are going to continue our spring training tour of Major League Baseball, and we will do it focusing on the San Francisco Giants team that captured the wild card, beat the Mets in the wild card game last year, and then went on to have what was really a fantastic series against the Cubs. Unfortunately for the Giants, they were unable to put away Chicago in that divisional series, and it was the Cubs who went on to go ahead and win a World Series a few weeks later. But the San Francisco Giants coming into 2017 with a team that pretty much mirrors what they had just a year ago. They didn't make too many changes as far as starting rotation is concerned, as far as lineup is concerned going into this year. Bullpen is going to be a story to watch this year, and we will talk about all that here as we dig in and really preview this San Francisco Giants season. Joining me today over the phone lines, a very special guest. We've had him on many times before, and that is Michael Saltzman, a.k.a. Candlestick Will. And Michael joins us over the phone lines now from the Bay Area. Michael, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing fantastic, man. Thanks for having me on. I always love taking time out of my busy day of watching sports to talk sports with you.
Absolutely, man. Glad to have you back on. It's always a good time when we get to this point in the year, and it's been a cold winter out west. It's starting to get cold here on the East Coast, and it's always good to start talking about some baseball when we get to this point in the year. So let's just jump right into it here with this Giants team. As we get set for this season, what would be your expectations before we delve into player position battles and looking at and scrutinizing each position and where players may fit into the puzzle over the course of 162 games? What would be your general perspective going into this year for this Giants team?
Well, I think if you look at where it starts in the NL West, and I think any Giants fan looking objectively would say, okay, even if we thought we could be the favorite, the Dodgers are right there, and the Dodgers have proven over the last few years that they have literally won more games than the Giants in the regular season, but there's no reason to believe that they're not going to do the same thing again this year based on the stats, based on the teams on paper, and if they can stay healthy, they could be even better this year because of all the injuries they had last year. So if any Giants fan expected to win the West, I think that's a little too high a bar. You want to win the West. You want to win your division. But to expect it, I think, is a little inappropriate. But I do think because of the wild card that being able to compete for the playoffs, being right there at the end for the playoffs, and possibly fighting for that wild card spot again, I think that's a realistic expectation. If this team were to be out of it in August, I think, or out of it in early September, I think that would be a disappointing season with the money they've invested in a lot of key players, the guys they have coming back, and even if there's a few positions where maybe there's not elite talent, there's above average talent on most of the roster. So if they don't make the playoffs, it'll be disappointing. If they don't make the playoffs because they missed by a game or two to a hot, Cardinals team or a hot National team or something along those lines, I don't look at that as a lost season. But if they're out of it 2-3 weeks to go in the season where there's no chance, I think that would be a disappointment. So fighting for the playoffs and then hopefully making the playoffs, I think, is where Giants fans should anticipate and expect.
I think that's a very fair perspective, and you take a look at that division, and it's a division where the Dodgers still have to be considered the favorite in that division to win it. I agree with you there. You look at the other teams within the NL West. Arizona, are they ready? We've been talking about Arizona coming up for a couple of years now. Are they ready to really challenge for a wild card spot? Maybe. We'll see what happens when we get to that point. I do have some concerns on their end of things. San Diego, Colorado, probably not ready right now at this point, and Colorado just trying to rebuild in a lot of ways right now with the Rockies. So if you had to ask me, probably the Giants and the Dodgers are the cream of the crop out west. But as we all know, it's going to be trying to find a way to get into that wild card spot for this Giant team. And I think with the expectations they've set, and I agree with you again as well, with the expectations this team has set over the last now 7-8 years, the bar has been set pretty high for this team. Winning World Series in even years, getting to the playoffs again last year. This team expects to be in the playoffs just about every single year now. So it really is postseason or bust for this team moving into this season.
Well, I think it'd be hard for anyone to look at if they, like I said, even if they miss the playoffs by a game, there'll be a lot of disappointed fans, I'm sure. But I think that also goes to look at baseball in general. Baseball doesn't have an NBA or NHL style playoffs. There's very few teams that make it in the first place, so you have to be a very good team to make the playoffs. And if they were to win 89, 90 games and not make the playoffs, I don't see that as a lost season. I see that as a disappointment. But again, if you make the playoffs, the Giants and other teams have proven that you can go all the way from the wild card spot. So, winning the division would still be the ultimate goal because that gives you the best path. But the Giants, if they win 80 plus games, they'll be in it, and if they get close to 90, they're going to be right there with everybody else. And then it's a good season. Obviously Giants fans are going to be greedy if they get to that. But, I think when you look at the history of baseball, if you're not a Yankees fan, there's a realization that there's only so many teams that make it, and we're in a very fortunate time because, for most of baseball history, only 2 teams made it to the postseason. So, and even until recently, only 4 teams made it. So, we're in a very fortunate position to have teams that can battle, and win 80-plus games and have a chance for the playoffs, because that didn't always used to be the case.
Yeah, and as I look at this Giants team, Michael, going into the season, I think the biggest question for me going in has to be the bullpen, because they did lose a couple of big pieces there. They did lose Casilla, who goes over to the A's on a 2-year contract. They lose Romo, who goes over to the Dodgers on a 1-year contract, and those 2 guys have been linchpins in the back end of this bullpen for quite some time. The Giants do go out there. They do bring in Michael Cohen from the Washington Nationals. They sign him on a 4-year deal, and he's going to be the closer of this team moving forward. And look at the stats from Michael Cohen. He's really had some really good years, coming off a great year last year. 47 saves, had a WHIP of just under 1, an ERA of 1.64. He's going to be 32 years old in about 3 weeks, so he's still on the back end of his prime, but still a guy you would expect to go out there and pitch well on the back end of this bullpen. I'm really curious to see how he's going to fit in as a closer and how the bullpen is going to be structured behind him.
Well, I think that's you hit it on the head. I think at the end there, in the sense of going into this season, just looking at this season, in that having the guy that is your 9th inning guy is something that Bochy's used to, even in years where even in the years, not in even years, but even in the years where they went into the season and weren't 100% sure on who their closer was after Brian Wilson got hurt. They ended up giving the job to Romo. They ended up giving the job to Casilla. Those guys ended up having the job. And, Santiago Casilla was never meant to be a closer. He was always a guy who could pitch multiple innings. He could get guys out on both sides of the plate. He was a very unique piece to have in the 7th and 8th inning because he could come in the 6th and pitch the 6th, 7th and really give yourself that extra buffer if a pitcher only went 5. Mm-hmm. And that left the bullpen when he had to be put in the dice because Romo struggled and they didn't have anybody else. And I think if you look now back, I think Bobby Evans and Brian Sabian would probably regret not getting Melance into the trade deadline and not getting a closer before that, and even in 2014 and 2015, because Casilla was never meant to be just a three out guy, and he never had the maybe the mindset of a closer. He wanted the mindset of a closer because that's what his team asked of him, because he was always a team first guy. But what that led to was some blown saves where, when he was out there, he's a ground ball guy. He's not a strikeout guy. So if there's runners on, or if there's any runner on and you're only up by 1, that's really hard to put that guy in the situation, because if that ball gets through, the inning stays when, 2 inches to the left or right and it's a double play. Little things like that. And that's the same thing with Jeremy Affeldt before that. He's a ground ball guy, so he's a great fit for the 6th, 7th inning when there's a 2-3 run lead. It's a whole different story when it's the 9th inning and a ground ball guy gets the ground ball, but it finds a hole, So you do need that strikeout guy, and you do need that guy that can do the job, and I think Melancon will do that. But you brought it up initially with the guys that are losing are veterans, and so to replace them with just the young guys that you had, there are always going to be question marks. They have Derek Law, Will Smith, and Hunter Strickland, who will get the first chance at being the 7th and 8th inning guys. But again, their lack of experience is, they have no choice but to have lack of experience compared to Romo, Lopez, and Casilla. And then with Jeremy Affeldt the year before, all 4 guys that won 3 rings are gone. So there's going to be a huge transition there. But I think Melancon being the 9th inning guy does solidify a bullpen that struggled so mightily last year. And these young guys are going to have to replace some very legendary relief pitchers.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And, you talk about the lack of experience for some of these guys in the back end of this bullpen like Law and Okirk. This is their opportunity to now get that opportunity to get that experience. And that's why you play the 162 games. And Bruce Bochy's going to mix and match these guys throughout the course of the year. He has been a tactician when it comes to managing bullpen. Now, he's also gotten into some trouble managing bullpens in the past as well, notably last year. But still, you have to trust what he and his staff are going to be able to do with these young guys in this bullpen come September, come October, when this team is competing for the postseason. And if they are so fortunate they'll compete for the postseason going into October, you have to imagine that those guys at that point are going to be ready to rock and roll for some serious situational baseball.
Yeah, I mean, I think what it comes down to ultimately is execution. And, when Bochy was a master in San Diego, he had, what should have been already and will be soon a Hall of Fame closer in Trevor Hoffman. And, he had Brian Wilson, who was very successful. He has Mark Melancon now. I think he just operates better when he has a shorter bullpen. But he has always been great about finding roles for guys, being true to results, and being true to history. So when he's leaning on a veteran, it's because look, the young guys haven't proven enough yet. But if a young guy starts to show himself, he's going to throw him in the fire. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's funny. We look back at what happened last year in the postseason, and you consider what this team has gone through over the years. What happened at the end of that game was really kind of an anomaly. Now, I'm not taking anything away from the Cubs because the Cubs earned it, obviously scoring 4 runs in the 9th inning, and they are the defending champions for a reason. So we are giving them credit. But hey, look, I mean, it's not often we've seen the Giants in situations where they put in guys that they trust and believe that they can get outs, and it just did not happen for them in the 9th inning as the Cubs came all the way back. So it's just one of those things that happened in a baseball game. So moving into this season, you know that Bochy is going to trust his guys, the guys that he's putting out there, and guys like Hunter Strickland will be very, very important to this team going into this year. Here's a guy who does very well against right-handers. Righties hit only 197 against them. That veteran presence, kind of that bulldog mentality coming out of the bullpen before Melancon in the 9th inning. Guy's going to eat a lot of innings. Guy's going to get outs. He's not a strikeout pitcher, but he gets outs. He keeps the ball down, doesn't walk guys. He's going to be a big part of this. And then you also consider Contos, who pitched in 57 games last year, another guy who doesn't walk too many batters. Doesn't walk too many batters at all. Not a strikeout guy, but a guy who also had a very good ERA last year. So those two guys, with that experience that they have, 2 veteran pitchers, very important to this bullpen, 7th, 8th inning to set things up, and also take a little pressure off those 3 young guys they have in there too.
Well, and I think that's something that Giants fans have seen, quite a bit of now, is that, when in doubt, lean on your veterans. When in doubt, lean on the guys that have gotten you to this point. And so a guy like Contos might get more opportunities early on than some other guys. And I think that just goes to, the idea that, when Bochy calls on you, it's because he's putting his faith in you, and he's not gonna judge you based on one performance, but he is going in there with, hey, we're expecting something of you. And so it shows the locker room, I think, when you go to Kontos first before you go to some young guy, that it's like, hey, Kontos is the one I trust right now because he's the one I've seen do it before, and we're going to give him the first shot, and then we'll give you the next shot, that kind of thing.
And then we look at the starting rotation. It's really a solid rotation. First of all, the obvious key is going to be health. We all know that. Last year, they had their top three guys, Bumgarner, Cueto, and Samardzija, all pitched 32 games last year. They would love to get that again this year if that's possible. Moore came up big towards the end of the year, had a great run in the post, and a nice little run there in the postseason as well. Pitched great in that game where he gave only two runs over 8 innings against the Cubs. So you got him now and in the 4th spot, solidified in this 4th spot. Sounds like from reports, Matt Cain is right now the favorite in the clubhouse over Ty Black to get that number 5 spot. Now, of course, Cain has had his issues over the years dealing with injuries, and we really don't know how timetable is as far as how long he's going to be healthy. For if he does get hurt, what will happen? What would be the situation as far as the number 5 spot in the rotation? If he does flatline, if he does bottom out, I should say, as a starter in this rotation, do they move him into a long relief role? So his status, in my mind, even though he's right now the favorite to get the 5th spot, would be kind of up in the air this year.
Yeah, I think what the Giants have shown, with guys like Barry Zito or Tim Lincecum and others, is that the least likely thing they'll do is release him if he wasn't to win the job. So if they felt like Ty Block was a better option at the 5 spot, then he would probably start in the bullpen, be a guy who can spot start if someone needed a rest or if someone got hurt. Johnny Cueto, is starting in camp late. Samardzija now has been added to the WBC roster, so you can never have too much starting pitching. You being with the Mets out there, you know how important it is to have depth there. Injuries are just flat out going to happen. You mentioned how many starts those guys had last year. Moore had Tommy John surgery a couple of years ago, so you can't just assume you're going to get 33, 34 starts from everybody. And so even if Matt Cain wins the 5th starter job, it doesn't mean that he'll keep it all year. My biggest hope for the Giants, if people were asking, was I'd love to see Matt Cain start 30 games. And the reason I would say it like that is that if he's starting 30 games, he's doing fine. Because they're not going to throw him out there for 30 games if he's struggling. If he's really struggling and is really having a hard time getting into the 5th inning, then they're going to go with somebody else. They have Ty Block and they have their young prospect Tyler Beatty, who they can go to if they have to. And so with that, with those guys at 6 and 7 right now on paper, you're not going to just force feed Matt Cain. And we saw last year with Jake Peavy and Matt Cain that both at times were good and both at times really struggled. You would know that from the Giants-Mets game where Peavy was awful, and it's like, and so when those guys struggled, the Giants did eventually go with other guys, and they didn't go with other guys right away, and it took a couple months. But part of that is because even if they're struggling early on, even if it's a bad inning, those innings mean less innings for your bullpen. Those innings mean less innings for other starters down the way. It all kind of evens out. And so, over 162 games, you're going to lose 50, 60, 70 games. You're just going to. No matter how good your team is, you're still going to lose 50, 60, or 70 games. So sometimes you got to fight to play another day. And so sometimes that means leaving a Cain in there to kind of get beat around, in April, because you want to save your bullpen and those kind of things. And that's what having Bumgarner, Cueto, Moore, and Samardzija helps with, is that if Cain were to struggle, let's say he goes 2 innings and needs to be pulled, then Bumgarner is likely to maybe pitch 7 or 8 innings the next day and save the bullpen from having 2 straight bad, or 2 straight long outings. And so those are the kind of things that I think will play a factor in Kane making the team kind of no matter what. And if he loses the job, they'll probably go with Ty Block first. And I wouldn't be surprised if Ty Block ended up being the starter in May, whether he started the year or not, just because Matt Kane has been struggling, and they know that Block is ready to be given a shot. But I don't see Kane team until the end of the year because they just haven't done that in the past. And so even though he has a huge contract that, I don't think it's a money thing. I think it's more of a respect thing as far as leaving him on the team. Money's an obvious reason that he's given every chance to start, but I think the respect they have for him, the same way they had respect for Zito and Lincecum, is why they won't release him until August or September if he was really struggling.
Well, absolutely. I mean, here's a guy who was really a face of this rotation in the early part of his career. Really was at a all-star level for quite some time at the top of this rotation right there with Lincecum, and he certainly has earned the right to have that kind of respect given to him by the San Francisco coaching staff. They've worked with him for all these years. Dave Righetti, pitching coach, has worked with him all these years. So if you're the Giant fan, you want to hope that Matt Kane can reclaim some of what he once was, and if not the case, certainly can contribute in other ways, whether it be coming out of the bullpen, if it came to that point later in the year, maybe finding a way to at least give the Giants 5-6 innings in starts throughout the course of this season. Try to bridge the gap to the bullpen just a little bit, give some guys some rest. So that's what you got to hope for from Kane. And as you mentioned before, you're going to get innings. You're going to get innings from the other guys, especially the top 2 guys in Bumgarner and Cueto. And one thing about Bumgarner, last year there was about a 2.5 month stretch from May through July where he was pitching at least, and there were a couple starts where he pitched 6 innings, but at least 7 innings in all of those starts, which is just incredible when you think about it to do that in the middle of summer. Now, he did taper off a little bit in August, but then came back on fire in September. Really curious to see how all the innings that he has logged over the years, and this is now his 9th year in the league, how he's going to pitch this year. I would expect, age 27, he is now 9th year in the league, nothing but continued success from him. But again, as we said before, you just never know. You can't assume anything. But he's going to be the top dog in this rotation. You got to love the way Cueto pitched last year, coming here first year with this Giants team. And there were times that last year, Michael, where you could even make the argument that Cueto was really the Giants' best starting pitcher at times.
Oh, absolutely. I think Bumgarner kind of feeds off, being the ace, and not because he has any kind of ego, but just because he has so much confidence in himself, and he's such a team guy that he wants to feel like he's the go-to guy. Like, my team counts on me, and he puts that pressure on himself. It's like, look, they're asking me to be the main guy, so I'm the guy. And Johnny Cueto is very much the opposite in a lot of ways, in that he just loves the game. He has fun out there. He clearly, does things differently than most pitchers, and it's one of the more enjoyable things from a long 162-game season was watching how quickly Johnny Cueto and Buster Posey kind of bonded over the fact that there was so much respect Posey had for the way Cueto went about his business, and Cueto was so quick to let Posey kind of help him take over and kind of decide what pitches to throw before the game, to where Posey would throw something down and Cueto would go with it. And to see 2 guys that know the game from a mental standpoint so well work well together so quickly, I think there were times where you're absolutely right, where I think Cueto was just in tune so much with Posey so quickly that it made it where there were times where he was the better pitcher. And that's comparing to Posey and Bumgarner, who literally went through the system together. And so it's pretty fascinating how quickly, all things considered, how quickly Cueto kind of, became a Giant. And his first 3 starts were 7 innings each. And I remember writing an article based on just 3 starts, that Cueto's already a fan favorite because you saw the shimmies and you saw the joy he had for the game and how much he loved when Crawford would make a dive to save a run and those kind of things. And you get that energy. It's the same thing Pence brought to the Giants when he came over, where you just see a guy who's a kid out there. And I think that was infused in the team a little bit. And especially through the summer, I mean, Cueto was one of the guys that really carried them. I think one of the things that will be interesting this year is Matt Moore being on the Giants for a full season. Because the way he finished the season, you could make the argument that not only, I think he'll be penciled into the number 3 slot with Samardzija at 4, but Moore might be right there with Cueto and Bumgarner. I mean, that bar is super high, so I'm not suggesting it would be, just a guarantee. He may struggle at times during the year, but left-handed pitchers can be elite in the NL West with all the left-handed hitters that are in that division. And Matt Moore, the way he pitched at the end of the year, I mean, there's a lot of optimism, I think, in the top 3 arms in the rotation, and then with the innings that Samardzija can eat, that really does save what, like you said, just to start the show, is a bullpen that's going to have a lot of question marks. And so the best thing for a bullpen that has question marks is to not have to rely on them every day. And if you can go 6, 7, and 8 innings with your starters instead of 5 and 6, that's a huge difference. And when you have more 7 and 8 inning starts, you can save some guys, from having to pitch 3 straight nights or having to pitch, multiple innings and those kind of things.
Yeah, and I think in a lot of ways, Moore is the guy that if you were a team, you're facing the Giants at the end of a series, at the end of any point in a series during the regular season, end of the series, beginning of the series, not really the guy you want to face. Not just from the standpoint, obviously, that he's a left-hander compared to the other 2, or 3 if you want to include Samardzija in there as well, who are all right-handers, so there's the difference right there in the way the ball's coming out of the hand. But also, you just take a look at this guy's body of work. I mean, whether it be with Tampa Bay, now with the Giants, I mean, he's pitched in a handful of big games. I mean, the guy won 17 games coming out of the AL East, and a lot of people kind of forget that he did that a few years ago. And I remember watching that game again against the Cubs in the postseason, and commentators of the game, I can't remember who it was. It might have been Buck and Smoltz. I cannot remember, but we're just kind of lockjawed at how well he was pitching in that game against Chicago. Now, obviously, the game didn't turn out the way the Giants would have liked, but he was really leading the Giants in that game. Would have been the difference maker had the Giants found a way to hold fort in the 9th inning and gotten them a win. He could have been, had the Giants won that game and maybe even eventually won that series, could have been a possible MVP of that series. That's how impressive he was in that game, and it was really the continuation of a good stretch of games for him, where he pitched great against Colorado, pitched great against the Dodgers to start before that. He really did pitch well for this team at the end of the year.
Yeah, and, I don't think that, the Giants, I could say it's pretty much definitively because of the fact that they had to beat the Dodgers at the end of the year to get in, that they don't win without him. I mean, they don't get to the playoffs at all without him. And, I was as depressed as any Giants fan when they traded for him, not because we got Matt Moore, because I was excited about that, but the fact that we gave Matt Duffy for him, because he certainly seemed like, another homegrown guy that we were going to build around. And at the same time, it didn't take long for Giants fans to realize, okay, we liked Matt Duffy, we really liked him a lot. We were hoping he could be a lifer Giant like all these other guys seem to be. But man, Matt Moore is really good. And so it didn't take long to see what Bobby Evans saw and what Brian Sabian saw and other guys as far as, if we need a starting pitcher, it's going to make a lot more sense to give up on a guy we like in Matt Duffy for a guy who can come in and be a number 3 guy when you look at the off season this last off season, I mean, how many starting pitchers were out there? The Dodgers had to give Rich Hill $48 million because there wasn't that many other options. Rich Hill is a very good pitcher, but I mean he was the market. For the moment, there weren't that many starting pitchers out there that that people were going to be able to go out and get. And even in Rich Hill's case, he was re-signed. So very few good pitchers change teams. And so the Giants, I think, saw that and even said something at the time. It's like, look, there aren't that many options in the offseason, and we're going to need a starting pitcher beyond just this stretch. And with Matt Moore having some controllable seasons, I think it was a no-brainer at the end of the day, even though it was a tough call. And I think Giants fans are now not only completely aware of that, like you're saying, with the way he performed at the end of the year and against Chicago, but now I think they're realizing the potential of this team because of him, along with Cueto and Bumgarner, going into the season.
Absolutely. Let's take a quick look here at the offense here for the Giants. And folks, we're listening here to the Open Mic program. Michael Cohen, that's myself. On the phone lines, Michael Saltzman. We're going tonight, folks, from New Jersey to San Francisco here as we're previewing the Giants' 2017 season. Taking a look at this offense, and the one thing that the Giants did do is they didn't spend a lot of big money on offensive talent. And first of all, there really wasn't a market out there for them to do so. And you take a look at the way the free agency played out, and the way that a lot of hitters like Edwin Encarnacion had to settle late to go to Cleveland. Still got a pretty good deal though to go to Cleveland, but he wasn't going to get a big contract. Bautista was not going to get a big contract. Cespedes got probably the biggest contract of all three, but there really wasn't a big market out there for big time hitters this offseason. I thought what the Giants did was a pretty good job getting some nice, solid pieces, veteran pieces, to back some guys up. They pick up a guy like Nick Hundley, guy who's been a starting catcher in this league in San Diego, to back up Buster Posey. That's a pretty good addition there. They give Jimmy Rollins a minor league contract. They bring back Gordon Beckham on a minor league contract. So they did a nice job as far as adding some veteran pieces to what they already have on in this team.
The Giants the last few years have been very young on their bench, and I think that's hurt them in stretches over the last few years. I mean, you're talking about this little mini dynasty that they had where they won 3 titles in 5 years. So now they're going into 3 years since then, and the one constant was a lot of young guys on their bench, and that led to some of the problems. And so they had, for example, they have a guy like Kelby Tomlinson who has performed decently when he's been in there. A lot of fans already like him and have embraced him, but he has options because he's still very young. And by going out and getting Jimmy Rollins and bringing back Gordon Beckham and signing Aaron Hill, and you've got some guys who have done it before. They know how to play the game. You know what they can do. Now it's just, can they continue to do it? Can they still do it? But you don't have to worry about them, falling under the lights of a big game. And not that Tomlinson would, but it's still a lot of pressure to ask of someone, 8th inning of an NLDS, okay, you're the pinch hitter, go for it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so if you have Aaron Hill pinch hitting or Jimmy Rollins pinch hitting, they at least have been there before. They know that situation. They can treat it like just another at-bat, even though it isn't. And so I think that's why it's important whenever you can to get veterans to be that bench player, because then if you do need them to start for a month or longer because of injuries, you can count on them for that stretch. And you might not be able to count on them every day, and so then you might need to make a trade if you lose a guy for a season. But you can handle a month of Jimmy Rollins playing second base, or a month of Aaron Hill playing third base, something like that. And so I think that's something that is going to be helpful, is that they can send Tomlinson down, they can send Mac Williamson down, they can send Trevor Brown down, like you mentioned, Nick Hundley. Getting a veteran catcher who's going to know that he's the backup catcher, he's not replacing Posey, but that he knows how to catch, that he knows how to hit, he knows how to catch. So now Trevor Brown can be an everyday catcher in AAA, can continue to be a catcher, and continue to develop, but now he's not being asked to develop once every 5 days, or just pinch hit once in a while because you're the backup catcher. So you can't really afford to have him pinch hit. So when's he supposed to bat? Once every 5 days, right? So that's really unfair for a young guy to be put in that position.
And then, you add to that, you bring in a guy like Nick Hundley, who has had experience in this division with both Colorado and San Diego. So you get that kind of player who knows all the hitters in this division. That helps as well. So when you don't have a Buster Posey, whether he's getting a day off or maybe in a situation where they're playing in American League ballpark, DHing, they have that veteran catcher who has that playing in situations against a team within the division, obviously, has that experience to catch, let's just say, the day game after night game. So there's really no real drop-off as far as catching the game is concerned.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that, when you look at some of the guys that they've had in the past that have done well in that role, whether it's a backup catcher, infielder, outfielder, the Andres Torreses who ended up taking over jobs, or the Gregor Blancos, or
Benito Santiago, remember him?
Oh, I love Benito. I think even today you could probably still get a guy from his knees at second base. But like a Ryan Terrio, someone like that, it's that they know everything. They know what to expect from some hot young prospect pitcher. Like, they don't even have to know what they throw. They know what they're going to try and get them out with, because they've seen it all before. They've seen guys come into the league and try and get you out with their best stuff. So what does this kid like to throw? He likes to throw a slider. Okay, I'll look away, and he throws a slider that touches any part of the plate. I'll knock it to right field. It's like there's a calmness to a veteran, and one of the big unsung heroes of the 2010 team was Mark DeRosa, who barely played at all, but his veteran presence in the locker room really helped teach guys the game. And a lot of young guys that had never been there before, had never been part of the playoffs, had never experienced those things. He was a guy a lot of guys leaned on to figure out, how to handle it, how to cope, and how to deal. And I think that's sometimes as important as your best guys. Is, Hunter Pence and Buster Posey and Brandon Belt, these guys, they're going to be counted on to be the leaders in the lineup. But, a veteran like Gordon Beckham or Jimmy Rollins, could be invaluable for just keeping guys that are in the dugout calm, and keeping guys that are about to go out in the bullpen that, or know their situation is going to be crazy because the bases are loaded. It's like, okay, hey, you got this. Just those little things that, you don't ever see on the television screen, but are happening in every locker room. And veterans know how to do that. They know what buttons to press when, and how to treat guys and how to take care of guys. And over the grind of 162, the veterans are sometimes as valuable as the best players.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one thing I always like the way Giants team is built, and again, they don't have that one guy that's going to hit 30 home runs. They don't have that guy that's going to drive in 100 RBIs. They have a lot of guys that are going to hit 15, somewhere between 15 and 20 home runs, get their 85 to 90 RBIs. But the biggest thing, more important thing is they all get on base. They all get the hits when it matters the most, and it's always the next man up. And I will never forget, obviously, the home run last year in the wild card game by Gillespie, subbing for Eduardo Nunez, who's going to be back as the everyday catcher this year, obviously. And Gillespie, of course, gives him a very nice backup there at third base. But coming up in that spot, in a situation against the Mets, hits the home run that I believe still has not landed. It's somewhere flying through the air into Connecticut, I believe. But hits the home run, and you knew at that point the game was over. Obviously, Bumgarner's going to come back out there for the ninth inning. There's no chance for the Mets at that point. But that just speaks to what this Giants team has been about. It's been about guys really just being the next man up at any which way.
Well, and even the casual fan will remember Travis Ishikawa walk off to send the Giants to the World Series, and the casual fan has no idea who he is. And it's a guy who was on the Giants before and was released, and a couple teams later he ends up back with the Giants, and all of a sudden he ends up being thrown into left field because Mike Moore. I got Matt Moore and Mike Morse flipped
on the same team
Mike
now.
Morse was but Mike Morse was hurt, and so they didn't really have a left fielder. And Ishikawa was hitting well at the time in pinch hit roles and stuff. So they said, "Hey, go shag some balls in left field." And all of a sudden, he's the one that's producing, and all of a sudden, he's the one that happens to be up in that critical situation. and he gets the biggest hit in Giants history if you really think about it. When you talk about how many walk-off wins to go to a World Series has there ever been, and so one of the biggest home runs in baseball history comes from a guy who, in some ways, shouldn't even have been on the team, or could have easily not been on the team had other things worked out, or if Mike Morris is healthy, maybe he's not even playing. And so those kind of things happen, and I think it's all about, again, goes back to Bochy putting those 25 guys in positions for success, and not letting the guy who's 25th on the bench, the last bullpen guy, the last the guy who's just a pinch runner, the guy who's just a pinch hitter, from thinking that that's all they can be. It's just that's all they are right now. And that if they produce in that role, they're going to be given more opportunities, and they'll find other ways to get them in there. And so, hey, 6th inning, and we need a defensive replacement, you're now our first baseman. Little things of just trying to get them some extra at-bats, trying to get them some extra innings, instead of just, sit around for 2 months and then we'll find a spot for you. And it allows for the unsung heroes, the Connor Gillespies, the Travis Ishikawas, or whoever, to have those moments. And they still have to execute in those moments. Part of it is that culture that they, create to make them feel like, hey, you deserve to be in this spot, you deserve this at bat, you belong there, now go do it.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. The one position battle that I've noticed here, Mike, for the Giants is going to be left field. If you just take a look at spring training stats, I guess you could say that Williamson has a slight advantage, but I'm not sure how Bochy's going to approach this when it comes to the end. When we get to the point of the end of March, and he's looking at guys like Parker Williamson, Michael Morris, who's now back with his team this year, as far as who his everyday left fielder is going to be. For all I know, he could end up having a platoon there in left field this year. That wouldn't surprise me either.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm not sure what they're going to do, because they could have 5 outfielders to start the year, but Bochy might end up having an extra relief pitcher to try to save guys from the waiver wire and those kind of things. Matt Williamson has options, so that could be an ultimate factor in if him and Parker are close, that Parker might win the job because he's out of options. So even if Williamson has better numbers, he might not win the job. I know Bobby Evans had come out in the off season when they were getting Melanson and talking about other things, saying they'd like Parker or Williamson to win the job. And I think that if Williamson wins the job, I think Parker still makes the team because he's out of options. So they'll end up going with 5 outfielders. But they might start the year, just because it's a numbers game, because Williamson can go down, they might send him down so that he can play every day. And also because that saves them from having to release somebody. And maybe somebody like a Michael Morris or someone else who, can come off the bench, probably particularly a right-handed hitter, would maybe take his spot. They have a kid in Chris Marrero who's mostly a first baseman, but big bat off the bench, had 20-plus homers in AAA last year, and the Giants brought him over as a 6-year free agent. And, he's got 4 homers, including 2 walk-offs in spring training. So spring training stats, are what they are. They're playing in Arizona where the ball goes like 700 feet. So, take homers for what they're worth. But, he clearly is trying to make this team. And so maybe he's got an edge over a Michael Morris because he's younger. Maybe he has an edge over Mac Williamson because Mac Williamson could go down to AAA. I think Mac Williamson will be the better long-term solution in left field if they do end up finding a long-term solution of the guys in their system. But Jared Parker's playing well too, and so I think because he's out of options, he might end up getting the job to start the year. Now, does that mean that either one will be the starting left fielder in July? Who knows? If both tend to struggle, then I think that's going to be a likely place where maybe they make another phone call to the Tigers and say, hey, now what do you want for J.D. Martinez? Or
I agree with you. I think this is going to be very interesting to see how he puts this together, because we know what you got Span in center field, you got Pence in right, you got Panic, Belt, Posey, Nunez, Crawford. Obviously, those guys are all going to be there. I would obviously Gillespie. You're going to have Gillespie, Hundley, Rollins, most likely on your bench. You're going to want that veteran guy Rollins on the bench. I would guess that I could see Morse being on this bench, being that kind of power option off the bench if you wanted to go that route, at least to start the year. So now maybe you're looking at a situation where you could be looking at one spot where you could be either saying, okay, do we want to have 13 position guys or 14 position guys? As you just alluded to, losing one extra guy out of the bullpen or maybe gaining one. So that's really where we could be at this point.
And I think also, too, because of the numbers, they have 40 guys on the 40-man roster. So if they were to lose, or if they were to decide on bringing in Jimmy Rollins or bringing in Michael Morse or Chris Marrero or anyone who's a non-roster invitee, they have to release somebody. And so it'll be very interesting to see if they are willing to release multiple guys. And they might do it for Rollins and more than they would do it for Mike Morse. I know that everyone in the building loves Michael Morse the person, and every Giants fan does too. But he's in a very similar boat with Matt Cain, where even though we want to see something more from them, just sentimentally, if nothing else, they haven't really shown enough to warrant it yet. And because of Cain's contract, that's not going to mean he's gone. But because of Mike Morse's situation, there's a much more likely chance that they would decide to just go in a different direction if it meant the difference between a guy who might, hit a couple of homers versus a young guy who they'd have to release just to make room for him. So, that's where they might decide, we're going to go with Williamson because, even though we can send him down, we don't want to give up one of our 40-man roster spots for Mike Morse.
Absolutely.
I think Giants fans want Mike Morse because they just love him as a person, and they do love his bat when he's right. But again, he also struggled pretty mightily in Pittsburgh, so I don't know how many big swings he has left.
Yeah, I mean that's a very interesting point. I mean, he is now 34 years old. We'll see. I mean, I'm very curious to see how this thing's going to shake out, but. Other than that, I think that this is a Giants team, and again, just going back to what we talked about at the top of the show, only got about 5 minutes left. This is a team that could either be boom or bust, and I say that kind of lightheartedly from the standpoint that this team could either be in the mix come September for a wild card spot, maybe even a division title if they can stay close enough with the Dodgers or vice versa, or it could be a team that could, depending on how things shake out, maybe drop off at the end of September and not make it. So, to me, it's a team that could be kind of on the brink either way. I see them kind of being kind of that over-under number of 85, maybe a little bit over that, obviously 86, 87 wins going into this 2017 season. How do you see it?
I think 85 makes sense. I think, anytime you go into a season, if you expect a team to win 90 or more, I think your expectations might be a little high because 90 wins is hard even if you're a really good team. And I think there's been enough proof of that in the last few years where we've seen, the Mets and Nationals battle it out. We've seen the Giants and Dodgers battle it out. We've seen the Cubs and Cardinals battle it out with the Pirates. And it's, they beat each other up playing 19 times, each. And so it's hard to win 90. So I think 85 is a realistic number. I think for the personnel they have, the top three starters, that they have a closer now, with Posey and the rest of the lineup, they're going to want to win more. They're going to put their own bar at let's get to 90. But I think that 85 is also more realistic. It's something you should get. 81 and 81 is not a great year. And so you're only really asking for 4 more wins. So that's still hard to do in baseball, but that's not unrealistic. But those extra 5 wins is also hard too. So I think you probably have it right. I'm sure as Giants fans listen to this, I'm sure they would expect 90 because I think anytime your team is good, that you just kind of instinctively think they can win 90. But I think 85 makes more sense, and if they can get to 80 to 85 with a couple weeks to go, they'll be right where they want to be. And if they are at 82, 83 wins with the last weekend to go, that's going to make it tough to see any October baseball besides the regular season.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Mike, I want to thank you so much for coming on, talking some San Francisco Giants baseball. Always a pleasure to have you on and talk about baseball at any time. So obviously we'll resume on this topic and much more over the course of the season. Certainly as we begin the baseball season. So looking forward to it, man. As we're about to begin the 2017 season.
Well, you know how much I love baseball. I'm just glad baseball is back. WBC's having some exciting games, and it's just good to hear the crack of the bat. And it's good to see these guys playing again. And from me to you, I want to see your starting pitchers in New York healthy. Noah Syndergaard's one of the best young pitchers in all of baseball, and his staff when healthy is as good as it gets. So nothing but health to all your guys. I'd love to see the Mets have a chance at a healthy season.
Same to you guys as well. Talk to you down the road, Mike. Thanks for joining us, folks. I want to thank you all for joining us as well. Talk to you next time right here on the Open Mic program. Take care.